Centuries of Oppression, The Road to 1918, Chapter 21, Why were women included in the 1918 Act? Why was the 1918 Act passed when it was, with the war still raging? The answer is twofold. Firstly, the Act became necessary to revivify the electoral roll, which had been completely trashed by the war. Secondly, there was broad cross-party support that the vote could no longer be withheld from the gallant men away at war, so many of whom had given their lives or their limbs for their country. Both these causes are beyond doubt, as is made clear from the Hansard records, such as the Lloyd George speech quoted in the previous chapter. If they are fit to fight, they are fit to vote, was the prevailing sentiment. Both these reasons for passing such an act at that time relate to the war and to men. The matter is absolutely clear, however much some sources may attempt to elide the issue. The reason for the 1918 Act being passed when it was related to men, not women. Moreover, it would be preposterous to assert that the war was unimportant to its timing. Both the above reasons relate crucially to the war. So, why were women also enfranchised in the same act? Firstly, let us demolish the oft-repeated idea that this was a reward for women's war work. There is some excuse for believing that women's war work caused a change of heart in MPs who previously voted against bills to enfranchisement, not least the Hansard record. But these are politicians of which we speak. They must needs give a credible sounding explanation for their change of mind. But in truth, the majority had been in favour of female suffrage all along. The history of successive failures to pass bills to that end is explained by the Big Snag, the priority they gave to protecting their party's electoral position. The Big Snag was now defeated, since the offering in the 1918 bill included universal male suffrage. Female suffrage could now be adopted in safety, and women's war work provided a convenient rationalisation. Holton agrees. She writes, "Women's war work may have helped to persuade some MPs, but perhaps more likely is that it provided others with a face-saving excuse to alter their positions." And also, Holton again, in the context of women munitions workers, many, like the women suffragists' former arch-enemy Asquith, used such developments to explain their change of heart on votes for women. There are a whole battery of reasons why women's war work does not cut it as an explanation. Firstly, if the vote for women was to be a reward for female munitions workers, it rather missed its target. Being mostly under 30 years old, these were the very women who remained excluded. Secondly, women's war work was work which would have been done by men in peacetime. But working men had been doing this work forever without receiving the vote. How then can one consistently argue that such work was a route to becoming enfranchised? Clearly it was not. And if you will forgive my cynicism, governments are not noted for their generosity in rewarding past favours, especially those provided by manual workers. Finally, consider women in France. They did just as much war work, but failed to receive the vote after the war. So, why were women enfranchised in the same 1918 Act? Some have put forward the suggestion that the electoral changes were a ruse to acquire increased tax revenue by increasing the number of taxpayers to help pay off war debts. However, I have been unable to find any evidence to support the idea. Moreover, since the most significant change to the franchise was to eliminate the property requirements, the link to taxation was, at least initially, weakened, not strengthened. I must pass over this rather cynical suggestion. The reason why women received the vote alongside working men in the same 1918 Act was simply that there was no longer any reason why not. It's that simple. Recall that even Mrs. Pankhurst recognised that there had been a majority in Parliament for female enfranchisement since at least 1885. The correct question, therefore, is not why were women enfranchised in 1918, but why they had not been enfranchised earlier. And the answer to this is the Big Snag. With the Big Snag unsnagged by the wave of democratic sentiment due to the war, with the harder task of enfranchising working men now accomplished, the vote for women simply followed as a virtually automatic consequence. In short, women got the vote in 1918 as a collateral effect of working men getting the vote, which in turn resulted from the war. If you forget that the 1918 Act was really about giving working class men the vote, you will inevitably misunderstand the reason that women got the vote, and perhaps even commit the folly of thinking it was something to do with the Pankhursts.